Hello and welcome to our podcast. Today is the third of 5 short podcasts to support Mental Health Awareness Week, specifically exploring mental well-being in the workplace. I'm Erica Burke, owner of the HR department Solihull, and we provide outsourced HR services to local SMEs. And I'm with Asha Berzon, owner of Mindability, who help with improving emotional well-being through training and therapy. So far, we've looked at trauma and domestic abuse. We've still got some others to cover for the rest of the week, but today we're going to be covering parental and carer burnout. So let's kick off.
So thanks, Erica. So very quickly, Erica, what's your understanding of how carers have been affected by this pandemic?
Well, I mean, I think the pandemic has put a huge amount of pressure on carers. I mean, according to a study last September by TUC, around 43% of working mothers with children under 10 had to combine working at home and childcare. You've got Caring Behind Closed Doors did some research. 70% of carers have had to take on more caring duties due to the pandemic, with up to an additional 10 hours of unpaid care per week. So, you know, it really is an issue for carers, you know, parents and carers. And as we're going back into the workplace, people have spent an extended period feeling really overwhelmed by the amount of support they're having to provide. So, yeah, that's why. But, you know, from my perspective, Asha, it's interesting to, you know, we all know what a parent is, but do we all know what we mean when we refer to a carer?
Probably not, actually, and that's a really good question. And I think the best way to describe somebody as a carer is somebody who is regularly cooking, cleaning, doing the shopping, doing the transport, assisting others, doing their paperwork, you know, particularly for those people who have chronic illnesses, are frail, have mental health issues. And generally speaking, that's normally performed or can be done by staff, paid staff. But often, at times, it can be done by family members who are taking on that additional responsibility. And I guess that's what we're talking more about in this context, parents and carers, so those unpaid carers who are taking on these extra responsibilities. They might not see themselves as carers because, you know, it's somebody that they love and care about. And so they will do it and have been doing it with the pandemic alongside juggling all their other responsibilities. And I think there's a charity called Caring Together.
Yeah.
And they said it takes something like 2 years for somebody to recognise themselves as being a carer. So,
As a carer, and you know, that's really interesting because, you know, I was caring for my father long before he actually came to live with me. You know, I worked all day, I prepared his meals, I cleaned, I did the washing, did his admin, took him to appointments. You know, I'd drive up the motorway to his house, but I kind of didn't really think of myself as a carer at that point. But I can, you know, so I can understand why for some people it takes them a bit of a while to recognise that that's what they actually are. So from your point of view, Asha, I mean, at what point do people know that they've reached burnout, and how does it affect parents and carers? Does it affect them the same, or does it affect them differently?
well, I don't know, unfortunately, a lot about carers as in carers who are supporting adults. But there is some research that's been done around parental burnout, and that's kind of where I was focusing my interest, because obviously as a parent I was interested to know if I was the only one going up the wall or if there was something I was missing. But I think it's really important to emphasize that feeling stressed about being a parent is completely normal, you know, and just like with our jobs, we will have those highs and lows. You know, we will have those moments, like, for example, when, you know, the kids are going to go on a like when it's time to organise half term, You know, you can feel your stress levels increasing because you've got to find the right colour.
Yeah.
Then you've got to make the payment. You know, all of these sorts of things. Or if they're going on an activity, and you've got to make sure that they bloody have the right sandwiches, and you know, and they can't have things with allergies and all this, that, the other. So, you know, you can feel that. And so in that sense, parental stress is completely normal. But parental burnout is slightly different. And that's when chronic stress around parenting means that the parent feels like they're really overwhelmed with what they're doing, and it really stretches their ability to cope. So there was a study done last year by Brian, I think it was, and they said that there are 4 main symptoms to indicate parental burnout. So first of all, the parent feels completely exhausted and run down by being a parent per se. And that in an attempt to try and save some energy for themselves, they will then begin to detach themselves emotionally from their children. And so they don't enjoy being around their children anymore. And so the pleasure that you would get from parenting becomes absent.
Right.
You can't stand being a parent anymore. And then finally, the parent starts to struggle because they don't recognize themselves as the parent that they used to be and they want to be. So I know so many parents that experience this and again, you know, even though we talk about symptoms, you know, it's always just be mindful that we're going to experience them in different volumes. So in different intensities at different times. And there are so many parents that I know would absolutely resonate with this, and me included. You know, there were days when I just thought I hate being a parent, and then later on I'd feel awful because I felt that I hated being a parent, and then I'd try and overcompensate because I felt for being a really bad parent, and then I got frustrated because my kids weren't interested in spending time with me because now they just want to watch TV. You know, and so it can be such a bit of a vicious cycle in that sense.
And is that the same as being is that sort of burnout the same sort of burnout that carers go through, similar sorts of things?
I'm guessing so, because it sounds it's that sense of responsibility, isn't it? That you are wanting to look after, nurture, support the person that needs it. And then you resent the fact that you're having to do it because you can't do anything else, and you know, you then start to emotionally detach yourself in order to be able to do the things that you want to do, and then you have the guilt, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I can imagine that it's probably a very similar.
And how long does burnout last? I mean, does it resolve itself quickly once the situation changes?
I think that's the misconception, isn't it? Because even though if you think about the external world now for parents, it's gone back or getting as similar as what we remember it being. So even though the children have gone back to school, the reality is parents are feeling really depleted. You know, parents, carers are feeling really depleted. And they're possibly feeling a little bit confused or feeling a bit guilty or hurt by their emotions and their thoughts and their behaviours. You know, the amount of parents I have spoken to at the school gate who have said, you know, oh, I wish I could have spent more time with them, but I was working because I was juggling. And so although the environment has changed and it's gone back to what we recognise as being closer to normal, well, the reality is, going back to the stress bucket, the bucket's full.
Yeah.
And so again, it's more change. And again, that change within itself is another thing to now get used to and manage again. So yeah, I think burnout lasts for as long as that bucket is full. And it's for as long as that bucket isn't emptied and the person doesn't make the bucket strong, then it's going to be around. It's going to be around.
So are they the main sorts? You know, you've talked about some of the symptoms or the evidence that somebody's actually reached burnout.
Yeah.
Are there any others that typically, or are they the main common ones that you've mentioned already?
Yeah, sure. So generally speaking, from the study that was done, like I said, from last year, they're very similar to what we recognise burnout to be per se. So, you feel like you have very little energy, your immune system's compromised, you're constantly feeling really exhausted, even after you've had some sleep or you've taken a break. You start to neglect yourself because you're just too busy and you're just trying to do as much as you can. Your life revolves around the caregiving, but it doesn't give you any or very little satisfaction. You find it really hard to relax. You're increasingly becoming impatient, and you find that you get really irritable really quickly. As expected, like I said, with burnout, you find it hard to sleep. You overreact to things. You start to find that any existing health conditions can become exacerbated. Your concentration's affected. You also then create unhealthy habits as well. So that might include smoking, drinking, eating more. And again, because all your energy goes into caring or parenting, you then cut back on leisure activities as well. So these are all, to be fair, very similar things that you would see with burnout generally. But I know you've mentioned, Erica, that you were a carer pre-pandemic. Does any of this sound familiar?
It does. I mean, it really does. And especially when, you talked about you're trying to juggle, working with looking after somebody. I was a carer for 6 years. I looked after my father, who came to live with us, and I was working full time. I've got 2 young children. He had dementia pretty much overnight, and we had to do everything for him. So some of those things that you mentioned, feeling guilty, I was, going to work, rushing to collect him, getting up early, not sleeping well, getting irritable, all of those things that you're saying are things I didn't know or think about being burnt out, but certainly towards the end of my time, I did feel very tired. And I'd felt at that point that, you talk about this bucket being full. I think I had reached a point after a few years where I knew that my bucket was full. And, I can't imagine what it must have been like for somebody to have done all of that during lockdown. I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been for people.
That you were a carer?
Not initially. Again, I didn't at the time know how the company I was working with, I didn't know how they were going to react. So I didn't really mention it initially, but then it became, I needed to work flexibly. And I then had to build that in. And I was leading a big project at the time. But yeah, so, I told them, and they responded to it. And, hopefully more employers, will behave like that as we go forward.
What kind of support did you get from them?
Oh, well, to be fair, they were really fantastic. And, you often hear people say, oh, well, if you're in a senior role, then, you can't be working flexibly because you need to be here to do this, you need to be here to do that. Well, I was in a senior role, and my employers were fantastic. Meetings were scheduled to suit, so that I could Skype in those days, pre-Zoom. But it was only a few, I say it's only a few years ago. But I was able to Skype into meetings. The time of meetings, we didn't have the early morning meetings. We had them slightly later in the morning, which meant that I could attend because I was dropping my father off. So working flexibly, they really did respond, and I was able to deliver a really important piece of work. So from personal experience, I know it can be done. Yeah. So I mean, you talked yourself. You've got your 2 children. You felt close to burnout. But what could individuals do to look after themselves? I mean, what did you do to look after yourself?
I think the dimension that I have is, and I think you'll recognise this as well, is that I'm a mum that runs her own business.
Yeah.
That's the extra dimension, that's the extra layer, because if we don't work, we don't get paid.
Absolutely.
And so I think that was the other thing. And And so that was the other thing I'm mindful of. But in terms of looking after myself and some of the things that I put into place, and certainly my clients in terms of when I'm working with them, free advice I've given, I shouldn't say free advice because I'd give it to anybody, but advice I've given to moms while I've been sort of dropping off the kids and having chats with them is, you know, the key thing to remember is that it's a really tough time. So being kind to yourself is so important, and practicing self-compassion. And the reason why I say that is there are going to be times where you're going to yell at your kids. And okay, it's not ideal. And as long as you recognize it's not something that you're doing on a daily, frequent basis, so your communication isn't constantly that way inclined, you know, then actually you're doing a good job, you know. So allowing yourself to almost cutting yourself some slack, that's the expression. The other thing that I definitely encourage my clients to do, and something I got into the habit of doing as well, is start focusing on what I call the 3 Ps. So positive actions, interactions, and thoughts. So allow your brain to start focusing on the things that you have achieved, as opposed to what you haven't achieved. Because all that's going to do is make you dwell on everything you didn't do.
Yeah.
Whereas if you focus on what you have done, you can then get those reward neurochemicals, which will make you feel better. And guess what? Help you empty that bucket. And so that's really important. The other thing I tell my clients is, you know what? It's okay to have standards, but recognize when you're having unhelpful, unnecessary standards. So, you know, thinking what we should be doing might be including, I don't know, you know, making home cooked meals every single night. If taking a break from cooking means that you get to go and have a nice relaxing bath, then so be it. Because if it means that your emotions are in check and your bucket is a little bit emptier, that's much better. And one of the things that I've started doing, and I am definitely telling my clients to do, is, well, you know what, the schools have reopened, so between the hours of 9 and 3 you have got something like 6 hours. Take annual leave. Got lots of annual leave. Take that annual leave and do something for you, no matter what it is, whether it's going to a nice country park or whatever it might be that floats your boat. Do it for yourself. Replenish yourself, nurture yourself. This is the time to do that. Pick your battles with your kids.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely imagine that.
Yeah, because when your bucket's full, you get to that place, don't you, where you just constantly feel like you're frantically going from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing. And obviously, if you're constantly doing that, you don't get that time and space. Your kids don't understand, do they? That mummy needs to get here or daddy needs to get. They don't understand that. And
no, so, that's right. That's absolutely right.
You know what? If they just want to wear wellies, let them. It doesn't matter. The other thing I would absolutely say is reconnect with your children in a way that it becomes meaningful to you and to them. Because, you know, as we noticed earlier with parental burnout, there's an emotional disconnection. So when you practice the 3 Ps, so positive actions, interactions, and thoughts. You know,
what was that? Positive actions.
Positive interactions.
And positive interactions and positive thoughts.
Yeah. When you practice that, just take 5 minutes, like even in the car. So I do it in the car with the kids when I'm on my way home from school. And I will ask them, what did you enjoy doing today? What did you enjoy eating today? Who did you like speaking to? Who made you laugh today? Who were you kind to today? But what you're doing is you're getting them to think about their 3 Ps.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good.
And so you can share it with them, they can share it with you. And it kind of acts as a reminder that your kids are thriving, even though they're not in your care.
Yeah.
Letting the reins go a little bit as well. So those are the kind of things that I support my clients to do, and I actively try to do myself.
That sounds really good advice. Really good.
Yeah, do it. Absolutely. But I know your kids are much older, but absolutely still do it. But what do you think employers can do to start supporting working carers?
Well, I think the first thing that they could do is they can, you know, ask employees to let them know whether they are carers, because you know, if an employer doesn't know about what's going on for you, then it's really difficult for them to be able to help you.
Yes.
So having a policy, and I talk about policies all the time, but if there's a policy in place, that would give staff the confidence to talk about. So if you've got a carers policy that, you know, let staff know that it's something that you're, you know, open to having conversations with, and they can tell you, because if you know, then you can do something about it. So, you know, I'd say let them know, find out that they're carers, put in place a carers policy or some clear guidance, put in place proactive measures around childcare, for example. You mentioned about people taking annual leave. That is an absolute option. Under current legislation, parents can take unpaid time off for dependents, but that's usually to deal with emergencies only. So annual leave or even unpaid time off, it's really about being flexible. You know, some organisations do lots of different things. Some people are really proactive in this area. And, you know, I'd heard of one company that were, you know, giving people back the amount of leave that they've had to take due to caring responsibilities. Yeah, so, you know, you can be creative about it. You know, you can also allow employees perhaps to leave their mobile phones on in meetings in case of emergencies. You know, it's not for everybody. It's not always going to be appropriate for everybody. But, you know, some people need access to a telephone to check on the person they may be caring for while they're at work. It's little bits of flexibility that you can show that really would help. You know, and it is developing that culture that genuinely accommodates flexible working. You know, carers want to be at work as much as anybody else. And it's a shame that so many of them end up having to give up their jobs because they can't do both. Well, you know, the two things are not mutually exclusive. You can be a carer and you can do well in your role. And it's just about being in the right environment to help you to do that. So, yeah, I think that's what employers can do. Always start with a policy and let's take it from there.
It sounds like...
Oh, and of course, they've got to signpost people. I should not forget that. You know, because there are other areas of support. So, you know, we talked about parents, you've got gingerbread, you know, caring together. There's, you know, I access lots of local support groups. So there are loads of places people can get support. And we can obviously signpost people there if they feel that that's what they need.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, being a parent or a carer is really hard and challenging when you're trying to hold down a career and employment as well. But as you've rightly said, they can absolutely work together harmoniously. And it means that employers retain their experienced, qualified staff, and carers can continue to feel like they can manage their responsibilities and continue to have a fulfilling role. It doesn't have to be one or the other, you know. No. And they can both be quality spheres. They can be, you know, good spheres of their life. I haven't got anything more to add. I don't know if there's anything that you...
No, I think you know, it is, you know, all about being able to have the conversations and, you know, being flexible and not being rigid for rigid's sake, and helping people to help themselves. So, you know, it is a two-way street, and I think that you know, we've talked about some really interesting things around what individuals can do and what help they can get from people like yourselves, and what employers can do and what they might get from somebody like, you know, me and my company. So, no, it's been really helpful. Thank you.
No, thank you. So, if you feel that you do need some support or help, what Erica and I will do is we'll add a couple of links to ACAS and Gingerbread, and maybe some other couple of organisations that can help you. If you feel that you need some support creating some policies that would be beneficial, then do get in touch with Erica. Again, her details and her website link and everything will be provided. And if you or anyone you know or a colleague would benefit from support in helping them to move forward from that burnout experience, then again, please do get in touch with me and you will find my details as well in the comments. So thank you so much for your time, Erica, and take care.
Thank you.
Speak to you soon.
All right, thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.